Good evening, everyone. My name is Brigid Coult, and I'm the BCCF Project Manager. It's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you here this evening to this summer BCCF webinar. The BCCF acknowledges with gratitude that we live, work, and sing on the traditional and largely unceded territories of many First Nations peoples whose rich cultural heritage surrounds us. A few housekeeping things. We are recording this for the archives, as you saw when you came in. We may not have all the answers. In fact, I know that we don't have all the answers, but I suspect that there are a number of choirs out there who can't be with us tonight who will want whatever we come up with. Please keep your video switched off and your sound muted. There will be opportunity for questions later. We would like to thank all the people who asked questions in their registration. If there are further issues, please ask them in chat, preferably with the letter Q at the beginning. And can I suggest you hold your questions for now? I suspect many of them will in fact be addressed. There will be some resources available on the BCCF website, and Andy will post a link with them in the chat towards the end. We are joined this evening by Andy Rice on Zoom Tech, our Executive Director, Willie Dwozdewski, who tells me he will be hovering. Actually, he called it lurking. And our three panelists, who I will introduce in a moment. However, we need to be straightforward up front that there has not been any clear directive from Provincial Health Officer that relates to choir. We have had a communication fairly recently, but it wasn't honestly very helpful. It was stuff that most of us knew. And we need to be very clear that the BCCF is not telling any choir what they may do or may not do. In March 2020, when everything was first shut down, we had word of the Skagit Valley Choral and their exposure to the COVID virus, which resulted in more than 80% infection rate, 3 hospitalized, 2 deaths. There have been other similar examples in choirs in North America and in Europe. Choirs were almost immediately under fire, and we've seen the results. More than a season of music making in which many choirs went on hiatus. Others turned to technology, and a few, very mainly small groups, continued to rehearse, but with enormous caution. In past July, our province largely opened up again. We were told that there were no restrictions on church services, that indoor events were limited to 50 people seated, or 50% of the room capacity. There was no specific mention of singing, and there was nothing that addressed the needs of children's choirs. Having had choral music vilified for so long, we would really like to know what the science is that would suddenly make it okay for us to sing again. And for now, I think we have to take it that the science we have is what needs to guide our path. So in the absence of measurable evidence, we are left with people who desperately want to sing again, but who fear vaccines or no vaccines. And with this new Delta variant, we are hearing that even vaccinated people may be COVID positive. The vaccine does not necessarily protect us from infection. It just makes the infection effects less strong. The plan this evening is that our three presenters will talk about the practical aspects of choir as they have functioned over the past year. All three of them have continued to work with choir. And as they are planning with pivot alternatives for the upcoming season. And then we'll take time to address some of your questions and to say we don't know when we don't. So it gives me immense pleasure to introduce our presenters this evening. Robin Norman is the director of Nove Voce Women's Choir. She is an active member of the Prince George Arts community, often volunteering her performance and her professional services. Frances Chasson lives and works as a choral conductor in Kelowna. She works with the Okanagan Children's Choir, Musik, Vocal Ensemble in Summerland, and as a minister of music at First United Church. Frances is a member of the BCCF board, and she's a certified teacher in our province, and she's mom to Sophia and Noah. Patricia Plumley divides her time between Vancouver Island and the mainland. She has been on faculty at Vancouver Community College since 1988, where she teaches and conducts the Willan Community Choir. On the island, Patricia teaches voice and piano at her home in Nanuas Bay and directs the Vancouver Island Symphony's Symphonic Choir, Grade 5 Honours Choirs, and the Children's Choirs. You'll find more info about all three of them on our BCCF website, but let's get going. Robin, you're starting us off.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for everyone for coming out. The first thing I just need to say is, much like Brigid said, I feel like I am muddling through and doing my best. My main mission is to keep my singers safe, to keep them happy, and to be as inclusive as I can. So that's sort of how I approached last year. Nove Voce did keep singing. We stopped in November when everybody else did, but then we came back in small groups, outdoors, distanced and masked in the spring when things relaxed a little bit again. And then finally, we had a couple of rehearsals at the very end of the year where we were back together in medium groups, like 13 singers. So with that, I'm just going to sort of share our screen and let you see what we've been doing. Nove, first thing I have to say, is a small choir. I don't know that I would be making the same choices if I directed an 80-voice choir or given the different age ranges in choir. So I need to be really direct and say my choices are because I have a younger choir and it's a small choir. So that makes us very pivotable very easily. It's very easy for me to find space that I can distance quite easily, and I'm not facing the same challenges as some of the bigger choirs. So last year we had 17 people who came in person off and on, and we had 2 members who attended on Zoom all year. This year we have 22 members all in person, but just to be really clear about our age range, I have 10 members who are 19 to 30 years old, 7 members who are 30 to 40 years old, 4 members who are 40 to 50, and 1 member over 50. So given high risk factors for COVID, we are pretty safe. The other thing I have to say, we had this chat last year where everybody sort of told me what was going on in their lives when we were deciding to sing in person. I only have 1 singer with a comorbidity this year, and I have 2 that have high risk people in their lives. So those are things I factor into all of my planning. But like I said, in a small group where I only have to really worry about 3 people in spaces, it's much simpler. So with that, what you need to know about Nove is that we pivoted really quickly in March 2020. We ended up on Zoom, I think on March 21st. We started our 2021 season in August, rehearsing outdoors whenever possible. We rehearsed in person, distanced once a week, and then we had weekly Zoom sectionals just to incorporate both factors. We had Zoom at every in-person rehearsal though, because of the strictures we put on our singers to come to an in-person rehearsal. Those were our safety protocols. We had planned entrances and exits, so that what we would do is I would send out a safety message asking who was coming that night, if they had been exposed, if they had left Northern Health, if they had any symptoms. If they could answer those questions appropriately, they were allowed to come to choir in person. If not, they had to attend on Zoom for 2 weeks was our rule. We always had a 14-day factor in there. So when I knew who was coming, I would determine a standing placement and determine a grid where they would go. Then they would get their entrance times based on the grid. So the back row entered first at 5:55. The second row entered the next time at 5:57. And they all went directly to their happy pylons that you will see later. Obviously, when everything changed, we went straight on to Zoom. But then by the end of the year, we were rehearsing in small groups, outdoors, distanced, and masked with all those same safety protocols in place. So like it says below, they had to respond. The several protocols we had were partly ours, and this is what I would encourage everybody to do when they're talking to their venues. Some of our protocols were imposed on us by the church we were renting. Originally, at the beginning of the year, in our contract, it said no one who had any symptoms would be allowed in the building for 21 days. So then we had to, it changed over the course of the year and it became 14 as things loosened up. but do talk to your venues and see what their protocols are going to be. And it will help you write what you need to write for your safety plan. Because that's what we learned. Basically, the one thing that we saw is the choir was incredibly resilient. There was really nothing they weren't willing to try to do this. People tried Jamilist, to try in sync singing when we weren't allowed to meet in person. People tried, we did everything we could on Zoom. They came out at -7 in front of a fire pit with tarps over them to practice in their small groups. And yeah, they're just really game and they're willing to try. So I feel like it's on me then to keep answering for that. So what we learned is masked and distancing does not change our sound. We are just fine. You can mask your choir if you feel that you need to, without endangering any musical integrity. And you will keep your people safe. Distancing, same thing. If you can have the space to distance, your choir will be safer and they will feel safer is probably another bigger thing. And you could work back in to bringing your people in, because how your singers feel is another big part of this. What you need to know as directors with these kind of safety protocols in place, absenteeism is very high. I don't think in any of our in-person rehearsals, I ever had more than 14 people, because with all the travel rules we had and with all the symptomatic rules we had, or if someone was exposed at work, they had to be on Zoom for 2 weeks. It just meant that we never could quite get the whole group together, for lack of a better word. That means that I had to plan almost double the time to learn our music. I would also say, just plan more time. But once we had adapted to singing in a distance formation, it got easier. And almost universally, my singers have said they feel safer and they feel very comfortable. So what we're doing now, we've started. We had our auditions on June 27th. I had 33 different people come out. Usually I audition en masse in a big room, but because this was an open call and there were space limits, I auditioned by section. So everyone who self-identified as a soprano or a mezzo or an alto came at different times. Of those 33 people, I took 22. I have to say 9 of those were, 7 of those would be almost complete strangers to me. So not people I had a connection with or that I knew. On my forms, I straight up just asked their vaccination status. I know that's not always a popular opinion right now. I didn't exclude anybody because of their vaccination status, but we are loosely planning to travel in 2022. That means for me that I cannot possibly do room assignments or travel assignments without knowing. I explained that to everybody and nobody objected and nobody was resistant to disclosing their status. That was my experience. It was a simple box in a form that said, have you been vaccinated? And if not, do you intend to be? The reality for us in Northern Health, it's getting better, but on June 27th, with the age range that I work with, very few of those young women could have answered that they were fully vaccinated, not because they weren't willing, but because they hadn't had opportunity yet. So that was an important factor for me in my planning. It was a paper form taking what sort of had been said at Choral Canada. We have completely destroyed those forms, and I am sort of the sole keeper of the knowledge. But if it gives you perspective, with my age range, I have 85% fully vaccinated, partially or with still in their 2 weeks of waiting afterwards is 14%, and 1% of my choir is not at all. So, but they do intend to be. That wasn't a factor in my taking people, but it did work out. In fact, actually every single person I auditioned said they intended to be vaccinated. Not a single one said no. We started rehearsing last Sunday. We were outdoors and we distanced. I said that masks were highly recommended for the non-vaccinated people and optional for the others. We had sort of a mixed bag of masking. I would say 4 people masked consistently through the rehearsals. Some people took their masks off and on. but it was very safe feeling to most of us. Once again, you will see them in other things. What I've been using are happy pylons, if you can see my picture. They have their name on them. They know exactly where they have to go, and they walk to their pylon. I use strategic standing placement. I have women in my choir who are frontline workers who are very exposed to COVID. I have women in my choir who are pregnant. I have women in my choir who are dealing with family members who are possibly high risk. So I always adjust my standing placement by those factors. I've really thrown voicing out the window. I'm like, you have to be independent and just know your part. So once again, learning takes a little bit longer, but then everybody is safer. So you'll see, this is the church parking lot where we regularly rehearse. There are two factors that I really love about it. It's an L-shaped building, so you can see there's two concrete walls. I position the choir in a triangle along there. It functions as a choral shell for me, which works quite beautifully. The sound is fine. You can see all the happy pylons that are everywhere with everyone's name on it. You can also see that I've put all their music right by their pylon. That means there's no common congestion point. They're not all stopping at my table to pick something up. They're not all stopping in one spot. I think partly because we had such rigid enters and entrances last year, the women were all very good. Even the new members who weren't here last year, they came in, they said hi to me, and they all walked right to their pylon. It's been a year of training in that sense. And so we don't have to deal with congregations and people chatting and stuff like that. It was funny, one young woman really wanted to talk to a friend who she hadn't seen in a long time, but she, instead of going and standing by that person to chat, she went to the nearest pylon and stood at the other person's pylon to talk to her, just because it's so ingrained in them now. The other thing that you'll see, it's quite doable. I have a little keyboard there, a folding table, and this was our first actually Zoom-free rehearsal since March 2020, because I had everybody there. Everyone was in person. So it was quite a lovely thing. You can also see my tape measure there, hopefully at the bottom of your screen. I still use that to place my pylons. You would think at this point I would be very good at dropping a pylon more than 6 feet apart, but I find that if I don't measure, things get close together. So you'll see almost all of those pylons are 7.5 to 8 feet apart, if not more, because I open my tape measure up, I lock it in place, and I use it every time. If not, I get into trouble. So with that, you'll see the same thing here. This is an outdoor rehearsal last spring. Our intrepid pianist sat there and played through everything. That's why she gets to be the closest to the fire. And you'll see we still use the pylons, we still use cover, and it all keeps working. It works through rain. We managed to rehearse through just about everything. And what you'll see in front of, the main reason I included this picture was it was a picture of our Zoom setup. We really just used my laptop, my very simple plug and play microphone, and a Bluetooth speaker. So I hooked the Bluetooth up so that we could hear the people on Zoom when they had questions, or to be inclusive. The microphone did enough work. The only thing I had to be careful of, because I set it far away from me, when I was masked, I had to use what would be called a singer's mask so I could be clearly heard. When I used just a regular mask, it was too muffled for such a big distance, because often I was another 3 meters away from the singers. So you'll see here that this is sort of what it looked like when we were singing masked and distanced in a space. The one thing you'll see down at the bottom on the ground, once again, the pylons were there every time. It's going to be our safety measure that we keep going on. You'll also see the laptop with the Zoom setup. I really found that if I set it up on a music stand, I could make the height better so the people on Zoom had a better experience than setting it on a table or on a chair. And then I would just set the speaker and the microphone in front of it. And this is my choir. I believe they were still learning this, but I picked this clip partly because it's a fabulous piece by Michael Snellgrove, published by Cypress Choral, and it has brutal diction. And if anyone is worried about their choir using masks at all, I'll play this for you. They didn't know it terribly well yet, so. And so what you can see there's several different types of masks that the singers chose to use. Some people are using what we call breathing brackets, if you can see me, and they put those under their masks. Other people were just using straight masks. Other people were using singer's masks. And other people were using what we sort of fondly called the beak mask, which was something that poked out to their face. I think their diction is quite good. This was recorded solely on my iPhone, and they managed. So if you have fearful singers, the one thing I have stressed to my choir, anyone can mask if they choose to. I'm not mandating it outside right now when we're outside, but if they feel better masking, do it, because then they will feel safe. I want people to feel safe and comfortable. That is the biggest thing. So moving on, our venue. That space that you just saw is the same as the outdoor space I showed you 2 slides ago. We rehearse outside if at all possible. The reality though is that this is Prince George, so we are going to have to move inside eventually. So what we know in our space is that the HVAC system here was overhauled in 2019 in the fall. That was just a fluke, but it was completely overhauled. So what the church has done is the sanctuary where we rehearse has a completely separate air system to the other major portions of the room. So the beautiful thing is they're not all intermingled, and it has 4 to 5 air exchanges per hour, a good fresh air intake, and they're using HEPA and MERC filters. So we couldn't, that to me, from everything I've read, is somewhat of the gold standard. So we're feeling very safe with that. What we are still doing, we have eliminated some of our protocols about travel. People can travel within wherever they want without having to miss 2 weeks, but we are still doing a health check prior to rehearsal. They are still using pylons where they go. What I do is, after I hear back or when I know that nobody is missing, I create a grid on Excel. That gives me a record every week of who is attending, who is standing where. If we ever find something where, heaven forbid, that we get an exposure, we will know exactly who was within how many feet of so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Our other safety protocol is all of our music and files are stored digitally on Dropbox, so no one will ever have any need to share side by side with somebody. I was joking earlier, the one thing I can always count on my choir to have their phones. I can't always count on them to remember their music. So with the Dropbox, they can just log in. They can see everything they need to see. It means that we can maintain our distancing kind of no matter what. Moving forward, I mentioned this at the Core Fest. I really believe that I am going to be partnering with other groups as much as possible. For concerts, our first concert we're planning is October 23rd and October 30th. It is outside at our BC Railway and Forestry Museum. It's a very simple plan. I'm incredibly grateful that I have 2 other conductors up here that I enjoy working with, Carolyn Dirksen and the Tapestry Singers and Kathy Pereira with Cantora Alegre. We are all smallish choirs, and so our plan is to position the choirs all around the train tracks of the Railway Museum. The kids ride the train, they stop, they get a short concert from each person, and the train keeps going, and then they get a free pumpkin at the end. Yay! So that is our plan. My hope is, knocking on wood, that there's no way this can get COVID canceled. It's outdoors. It's got sort of all the protocols checked. We can distance, we can mask, we can do everything. So that is our hope. Our choirs don't have to learn a ton of music for it, 5 to 15 minutes. And yeah, that's our plan. We're still planning that we're doing a Nutcracker. We're going to see how that goes. We are always a snow chorus, so we'll see what happens. I am only planning 2 other things. We do have a Christmas Grinch performance that we'll be doing. I am pushing that to the end of November rather into December, just because of the flu season, possibly canceling plans, and I'd like to avoid that. And my only other plan is for late May, early June, for us to do a spring concert, spring summer concert. But I'm keeping that programming quite loose because I feel like that's the one that will have our heavy music in it. So I want more time to prepare for it with a slower preparation rate. And also we just don't know. So that's quite loose and we'll see what happens there. Last slide. I just need to be dead honest with everyone that I've started rehearsing and I've told my choir what's going on and we started going, but I changed this presentation yesterday. I've warned them that masks may be mandatory inside, masks may be mandatory outside. We may be back on Zoom. We might be distancing all year. We might revert to small groups, just be ready to be outdoors in any weather, because that's what we don't know. It's one of those situations where I feel for everyone in our situation, because yesterday I was on one Zoom chat and we heard some really horrible news about things happening in one part of the world. And then I watched another webinar where they talked about a whole other aspect of things where things were going much better. We are about 2 months behind the States and the UK. I am watching those very closely to sort of see and try and make plans and to try and forecast. That's as good as I've got for you. I am trying to forecast using people who are a little bit ahead of us. Oh, Israel is the other country. They've got some fun protocols up if you look at their health service. So that's what I'm doing to try and survive. And with that, I am going to stop my share and turn it back over to Brigid.
Wow. Thank you, Robin. Lots to think about there. Lots of things that some of us are already doing. Lots of things that are going to come up in the questions afterwards. I know I've seen a few questions going past. Just hang on to them because I hope they're going to be addressed. Great stuff, Robin. We'll look forward to hearing about more of these things being applied. Francis is in the hot seat at the moment in central Okanagan. Take it away.
Thanks. I'm Frances Chassan and I live in Kelowna. We're the pariah of BC at the moment, I'm afraid. I am the artistic director of Okanagan Children's Choir, and also we have a youth choir called OCC Youth. These are 2 auditioned children's and youth choirs. I am the Minister of Music for now called Central Okanagan United Church, previously First United Church, but amalgamated on July 1st. And there I have 2 choirs, an adults choir and a children's choir. And with our amalgamation, we have several other choirs joining us as well. I am the music director of Mosaic Vocal Ensemble down in Summerland, about a 45-minute drive south of here in Kelowna. That's an auditioned adult chamber choir of approximately 40-45 people. And pre-COVID, I was the music director of UBC Chorus, which was a lunch hour choir for students, staff, faculty at UBC Okanagan, funded as a supplementary arts activity by the Faculty of Creative and Critical Studies at UBCO. Because of things being up in the air about return to UBC, I haven't heard from them of late, and I'm guessing that we will not proceed back at this time with that choir because of the fact that space is so tight at UBCO and always has been. So for the past year, pretty much everything I've done has been online. So hopefully you can hear me. Can you all hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. Everything I've done is online and I've done it all sorts of crazy things stood on my head when I needed to. Just like so many of you, I know. Different things for different ages. None of my groups met in person. So today, mostly I'm going to be speaking about what I'm currently thinking and or planning to do with my children's choir and my church choir, because adult choirs will be covered by the other two panelists. That's my main focus today. I need you to know I have so many questions and lots of unknowns, and I'm just trying to do the best that I can. I had moments of excitement. I still have moments of excitement for what can be, and I have great moments of despair at the moment. And I know that some of you are with me as well. That we may not be back in September as we were led to believe we might be. I feel like even the experts don't really know where we are at the moment for going back in September. And so I just need to be patient, but that's sometimes really hard. So to talk about my children's choir, audition groups, younger one, grade 4 to 7, and the older one is grade 8 to 12, which I work with my teaching partner, Taylor Bone, on the youth choir. Before COVID, we had approximately 25 choristers in each group. We performed several local concerts every year, festivals, small scale tours, workshops, partnerships with other choirs, that kind of thing. During COVID, we had approximately half of our younger group stay with our online program throughout the year, while very few teens stuck with us, just because I think of what was going on for teens in school, and the difficulties of connecting online. And so really our youth program sort of hasn't happened, but the children's choir was at about half. The current situation, as you may have heard about in the Okanagan of BC, is classified as an outbreak of COVID cases. We currently have a mask mandate for everyone over 12 years old indoors. We have a reduction in indoor personal gathering size, 5 guests or 1 family if you have them in your house. A reduction in the number of people for organized gatherings, indoor or outdoor, to 50. A reduction in the number of people dining together in restaurants to 6. All pubs and bars that don't serve food are closed, and there's been no specific guidance for choirs. Surprise! So we have just started to get started with advertising for our children's and youth choir programs. And part of that is we've been holding off because we didn't want to plan something and then immediately have to completely change it all after we've invested the time and the money in advertising what we were doing. When things were sort of up in the air. We've also learned over the last few years that people in the Okanagan are not forward planners in terms of choir registration. We've done advertising in June and it hasn't gotten anywhere. And if we wait till the end of August, all of a sudden we get all sorts of people signing up. So we've learned through experience just to wait it out. And so that's what we decided to do again this year. So we've been working on creating some graphics that we'll get up soon in the next couple of days. And also, we've been really hopeful that we'd be able to return in full, but obviously that doesn't look like that's possible now. So in our advertising, we're being very specific about our meeting start time, Wednesdays at 4 o'clock, for example, with children's choir, but very vague about the end time of rehearsals, because I may need to not have my full 2-hour rehearsals happening. I'm vague in my printed advertising or things that I'm putting online at this point in time about our start date. And I'm slightly vague about our rehearsal location. I'm very hopeful that my rehearsal venue will allow us back in for September. So far, there have been no rental groups in that venue since the start of the pandemic. I'm in regular daily contact with that venue, and I have my fingers crossed that we will still be able to be in there in September. So to get going, my current plan is to do outdoor meet and greet auditions at the beginning of September. Normally, I see families individually in my home studio. I'm going to move outside. I have a gazebo in my back garden, which I'm going to pull a keyboard into and use it there, and I will remain masked for those outdoor sessions. I'm thinking that we need to be slightly less stringent in terms of our entry requirements. Currently, we're in the situation that we need singers in order to make our program run. I don't have a full slate of singers who are waiting to be there. And I don't have a full slate of singers who are waiting to come back because a bunch of them have aged out. So that means I need to recruit at the bottom end especially. So I'm feeling that I need to be slightly less stringent about what I require from those children when they first start in choir. We're using this as a time to do a reset for our youth choir because we know it slightly sort of disbanded over the last year. So this is our opportunity. We've been working on a name change for our choir. It's been OCC Youth, and we're changing it to Okanagan Youth Choir starting in a couple of weeks. We're changing the rehearsal date for that group in order to make it work so that we can double up our rehearsals, which seems like we're putting more people into a smaller venue, which doesn't seem wise, but I think we've sort of got that worked out, that we want our rehearsals to be on the same day. So we're using this as our reset time. If we're able to re-enter our venue, obviously we will follow any guidance that the BC Health Authority gives us. We would be happy to receive plenty of guidance, but we know that may not be coming besides saying outside is best, space apart is best, and wearing masks is great. Our venue requires that we have a written reopening plan written out. So we've been working on that, and we will also provide that for our families. My current plan, given the state of things in Kelowna, is to have distancing in our venue. I'm not planning to do outdoor rehearsals if I can get inside. I have a large room, and so I'm hopeful that that will work, and that I will use either Robin's lovely Happy Pylons, or I know that others have used homemade hula hoops in order to give the children in their choir a place to stand in, and so that those can be spaced out ahead of time. Assign seating so that I can track who's seated beside whom for contact tracing, obviously, and not changing that up necessarily. Normally my rehearsals, I would change up where they stand and sit several times throughout the rehearsal, and obviously I'm not going to be able to do that as I might in the past. I'm assuming that we will need to mask at this time. I know that some of my children are under 12, and so it's not included in the mask mandate that we currently have. But I'm also aware that choirs spread aerosols more than others. And so the Colorado study suggests that really masking is best. So I am planning to require masks indoors at this stage, even though they're under 12. My very rudimentary scientific understanding is that the viral load with the D variant is higher than with other variants. And so the viral load that you expel in your aerosol is higher. And so even more reason for me to ask them to wear masks. I am currently planning to purchase some masks and have them available for my singers. And I've been following discussions. I'm sure many of you are part of the I'm a Choir Director group on Facebook, which has many discussions about all of these issues. And one of them is if you are providing masks to your students as they come into your room, then what have you stored them in since they were last there? Discussions about whether using paper bags or Ziploc bags or sending them home for cleaning. Those kinds of things are part of the conversation, and I'm just following those discussions, and then I'll make a decision as to what I'm going to do. Maybe I only see my kids once a week, so it probably makes most sense to send them home with the families. And some will choose to wear their own masks depending on what feels most comfortable for them. As of yesterday, my teaching partner and I had discussions around purchasing individual body mics for the directors if we're teaching in masks. My teaching partner taught in a school over the last year, and in order to avoid vocal strain for herself, she found she needed amplification while wearing a mask. And so what worked for her was to wear a headset mic and a body, the speaker that you wear around your waist, because it allowed her to have freedom of movement in the rehearsal. Didn't mean that she had to stay in one place. If we are able to go into our rehearsal space, it is equipped with a sound system, but I'm not sure I want to be fixed in one location or have a mic in my hand all the time. So the one that she particularly used was a voice buddy. I started to look into those. There's also conversations online. Again, that I'm a Choir Director Facebook group has had conversations around those pack mics that you can wear. So I'll be following up on those. So my continued following of the Colorado study and other studies around the world is that mask wearing is most important, 6 feet distancing most important, frequent air changes every 30 minutes, remaining only in your venue 30 minutes indoors if you have frequent air changes, and allowing it to have one full air change between times of you being in that room. Unfortunately, I rehearse in an old venue. There is no way we are going to meet any of the requirements that Robin is so lucky to have in her venue. So I am aware that I'm going to have either shorter rehearsals or I'm going to have to change rooms partway through my rehearsals. And so that's part of my conversations with my venue. Can we use the other room that's available that's big enough? Hopefully, how can we make that work? Obviously staggering and entry and exit times, as Robin has suggested. I do have a little outdoor area. I normally, just as you come into our venue, I normally do check-in at the door once they come in, but obviously that's a bottle point. And so we can do some hand washing station at that spot and have a volunteer place there to check off people's names as they come in. But that will have to, I'll have to work on that. Every course during our program has their own music bag stocked with music and pencils, so there won't be sharing of resources. I have typically had a break and snack time in the middle of our rehearsal, but that's not going to be so practical now. So we'll have to forego that, which is too bad because in a children's choir is part of our community building time. And so I'm going to have to find other ways to make that community building time happen. I, like Robin, will have Zoom available at my rehearsals for those who are unable to attend because of health concerns, quarantining, etc. And so my plan right now is I'm just going to use my laptop with my Yeti mic facing the conductor or facing some members of the choir. But it requires me to have an internet connection at my venue, obviously. So I'm working on that. We have decided that we won't be asking about vaccines at this stage. We're going to work to protect all our singers through masks and distancing, including our youth choir. Some will be vaccinated and some won't. We know that at the moment. And masks are currently required in our area for age groups. So in some ways, the decision has already been made for us there. If we were going to travel, absolutely, we would need to be having those conversations. My focus needs to be different this year. And that as a musician who struggles for excellence with my choirs is something that I have to be okay with. Instead of it being about performance and about high level singing and all that we want to do with our choirs, it needs to be about the joy of singing together in whatever way that can be. And that sometimes I have to take the step back. Well, I mean, the reality is I'm in the middle of August and I haven't yet looked at any music because I'm thinking about all these other things, right? So maybe that tells us where we're at. I know that group team building, while still maintaining distance with my choristers, is going to be a major thing that I need to work on. I want to continue the work that we did online over the last year in terms of music literacy skills. That was something that I went up in terms of what I was doing online because it was something that we could do online. And so I want to keep that going. We will do some repertoire learning, absolutely. And then, like Robin, thinking about shared concerts, but also thinking about using a venue with live streaming if we're unable to have audiences, or hire a local live stream company that we've seen you do a number of concerts in this area if we have the funds available. But all the way through all of this, to have pivot plans. We did so much over the last year, even though we were not able to be together. So we can pivot back if we need to. We know how to do all that, and we can do more of that. I so don't want to, obviously. We want to be together in person. Just briefly, in terms of church choirs, my church has been very, very cautious in terms of a return to in-person worship. We are not yet back to in-person worship. We've remained online since the beginning of the pandemic, with very few exceptions. And so the plan was that we would be able to go back to in-person hybrid worship in September, but that probably isn't going to happen because of our current circumstances. So it will be a gradual return. And likely it will just be music staff leading at first once we do get in person, and then add the choir at a later date. And as most church choirs, it's an older population in my adult choir. So we need to be cautious, although I also know just from people chatting that there is a high rate of vaccination. So that's good news. We have this a couple of added complications in my church. We have an amalgamation as of July 1st, so bigger groups. How do I fit them in my choir loft that was already full? That's a problem. And then how do we introduce them into leading worship? How do we distance in a worship service? That's going to be a challenge if that needs to happen. Maybe shorter rehearsals than normal, obviously, and maybe mass for all, or mask for those who are unvaccinated or want to be masks. That depends on where we're at. I'm thinking about alternative rehearsal space because of my choir loft being too small. And so, but now with amalgamation, that's going to be really an issue. I think also it's one thing to rehearse, but then it's another thing to introduce singing in worship. And so part of me thinks, even if we can't get together to sing in worship, I may, as soon as we're able, get us back together to sing in rehearsal and to start looking at some repertoire, and see where we go with being in worship. I have gone through started the motions of choosing a Christmas cantata. Wishful thinking, I don't know, but I've still started that process, and so we'll see where it goes. I haven't ordered it yet because I don't know. I'm not, interestingly, receiving any pressure from my members to restart. It's crickets, kind of. And so that sort of says maybe it's okay for me, just kind of wait for right now. That choir has done a variety of things over the past year, and so we can still do some of that other stuff. We can do some virtual choirs that I've learned to put together. We can still do some periodic outdoor gatherings to be together. We can still do some just stuff from our homes. We can still do some of those things. So I'm not going to talk much here at all about my adult choir, my adult community choir, except to say that when we last had a board meeting, we were like, oh, we're going to be able to be all together. It's going to be awesome. And then we're not sure about that now. So we're just going to have to wait and see. I think it's all about patience. So I'm going to leave it off there. Brigid, back to you.
Lots of patience. Thank you, Frances. Moving on to Patricia on the island.
Thank you, Brigid. I want to say, first of all, it's an inspiration to work with this team and hear the wonderful ideas that my two colleagues are coming up with. And everything they say spurs a thought about what I'm doing. And I hope that dialogue will bring the same for all of you who are listening. I'm going to start with the feedback that I've been getting from particularly the Village Voices of Qualicum Beach that I direct and the Willen Choir in Vancouver. I put out I'm going to call it a very informal survey, only in the sense that it was an invitation for people to connect with me and talk to me about how they're feeling. So it was a hi, happy August. We're turning around the corner. Gosh, what we thought in July is really not happening. Surprise, surprise. How is everyone feeling about their personal safety? Regulations aside, because we know that the regulations provide a form and a framework for what we do, we know there are personal reactions to safety and those regulations. So I ventured out my personal safety feelings about singing and just in general right now and said to everyone, here's what I feel. I have the Vancouver Island Choir out on my deck every Monday and Wednesday, or I shouldn't say the whole choir. I have available for them the outdoor venue. I have a very large deck and I have a backyard that they can be in as well. So I invite them out and we work on Zoom, and I'm very comfortable with that. Acapella Plus has been outside. This is my wonderful acapella sort of 16, 17 voice choir that I direct here on the island, who made it through with all members last year and did some wonderful virtual recordings in a celebration of their 40th anniversary. So that was a marvelous continuance, and the summer has been no different. We've had a couple of outdoor concerts in the gazebo at Tainamera, which has been wonderful, and some outdoor rehearsals on my deck. So I ventured out to the two choirs. That's a place I'm very comfortable rehearsing. The other place I'm comfortable exploring rehearsal is indoors, everyone in masks, everyone distanced, a large space, perhaps for some choirs a larger space than we've had, and ventilation nearby and available, outdoor ventilation nearby and available. So I put that out to the choirs. I said, on a personal level, despite regulations, my daughter and I don't go anywhere that's indoors, doesn't matter how many people, without masks. And that's just our personal safety protocol. So I was very curious to find out where people were at with that. And I have to thank everyone who sent a response, because they've brought me hope. They've brought me, the wisdom of patience, grasshopper. This will happen soon. They brought a very strong shout out for the great things that happened virtually last year. Here's what I learned. Wow, did I become stronger on my part? We could wait out the fourth wave and then get started. Everybody was clear that the great news is there's going to be a way to make choir go in the fall. May not be the exact one we wanted, but there is a way. And that to me has been very heartening. And every time I've been sitting down and reading all this conflicting information, and you can find information that pretty much backs up any viewpoint you want to have. There'll be something out there. So I can get very gerbil-wheeled by that. Someone will send me an email and say, vaccinations are important to me. I'm happy to wear a mask. If we need to be on Zoom, let's be on Zoom. And those kinds of emails are so reassuring that the top of our list is still music and singing. And when I hear Robin and Francis using the words hopeful or wishful thinking, go ahead, do our wishful thinking, because that's what keeps us going, and that's what keeps us thinking and changing and innovating. So I'd like to go through very briefly where all 5 of the groups that I work with have been and are going to be. The Vancouver Island Symphony adult choir did not meet last year and will not meet this year, and unfortunately may not return. Depends that having a choir with a symphony orchestra, we can't even have the symphony orchestra yet, let alone the choir and the audience. So that's gone, but we are keeping the children going. Last year we had them on Zoom, and every week a symphony member came and brought their instrument and talked to us about that. We did a little bit of vocal technique, and we learned some repertoire and put together a little virtual show at the end of the year for everybody. And this year we've decided, and fortunately decided, not to start till the end of September, and that wasn't COVID related, but I think it's going to be very useful. To do a short project-based choir session, 8 weeks, working towards some Christmas repertoire that we will do with the VIS brass, both indoors and outdoors. So we're hoping for the Port Theatre and for an outdoor winter festival. Had planned to do 1 week in person, 1 week in Zoom, just to save driving. And on the Zoom weeks, we could keep going with our visitors from the symphony. So that has a very easy pivot should we become under more restrictions. And the kids are very, very flexible. They learn quite a bit over Zoom. Of course, they'll be happy to get together, and we will have to, I like the idea of hula hoops, we will have to find a way to bring them together. So far, venue is a challenge because we've always used schools and we've always used senior centers as our venue, and we've had no word from anyone that they're willing to commit. So we'll we'll come up with something. Maybe they're all going to be in my carport. Who knows outside? Acapella Plus, next sort of smallest group, they have, as I say, they stuck together, they produced virtual recordings. We were in the Port Theatre filming for our 40th anniversary in these beautifully covered KN95s. And the sound was quite good when it was videoed. So we've gone through that route. We are hopeful that Wellington High School will allow us in because we have a space that borders on a courtyard. So it's a circular part of the building, and we have two doors into the courtyard. So we're hoping we could be outside, we could be inside, we could be small groups within the room, one group out of the room. These are quite independent singers. So we have a lot of flexibility that we can do. The first week will be on my deck because of course the schools aren't committing to anything that first week of September, but we've got our fingers crossed. School on the other side, which is Vancouver Community College, where I'm on faculty. The Willen Choir is the community choir at Vancouver Community College, and the V4C Concert Choir is the student portion of that. And we often bring those two choirs together. Last year we Zoomed together, and both age groups learned from each other. It was a wonderful, wonderful exchange. And I learned about how many ways I can test college students to know their parts that have nothing to do with actually singing together. And I will be keeping some of those. Right now, the colleges and universities are still operating under the idea that we can all get together and there don't need to be protocols. And I'm hoping that's in the process of changing. And regardless, my personal safety, and our department is being very, very good about this with us, my personal safety doesn't allow that. So we will be wearing masks. I have purchased, through the recommendation of Paul and Irene Percival from the Willen Choir, the masks that are available from the same company that sells the black folders. And we'll probably be looking at these later on. They're a wonderful kind of envelope shape. I just got mine today. I'm working on getting on, but it does make a beautiful envelope and a little bit of a space for singing. So I'm hoping that the college students will be very happy with those. And of course I will provide them because I can't trust that they will necessarily have their own masks or have thought of it. So we'll go that direction. The Willen Choir, the feedback has been unanimous that we strongly, strongly lean towards double vaccination. We are a choir all older than me, so that means we're in a senior category for the most part. We love our classics, and we worked all last year to learn some wonderful pieces of music that we may not even have looked at had we not been on Zoom. The plan is to bring those pieces together, have the joy of singing them, and mix that with some new repertoire. So I would say that is across the board for my groups, is that some things that we've done, but we haven't had the joy of singing together, will come, and some new repertoire will come. The big reason to me for the new repertoire is not just preparing about concerts. It's because I think that's one of the great advantages in Zoom, is learning new repertoire and studying the music and singing parts in two parts. So I hope to take advantage of that should we need to be on. The Village Voices of Qualicum Beach, much larger choir. They managed a wonderful year of Zooming. I had a very, very funny email from one of their members saying, "Oh, I'm happy to go back on Zoom as long as we keep mirth and merriment in place." And mirth and merriment was a 10-minute segment that let their two choir clowns go to town, bring jokes, tell stories. We all laughed, we all cried. No, we mostly laughed. And it came out very strongly that if we're going back on Zoom, that's something we're going to do. Every choir, particularly the large groups, will be a shorter rehearsal. For example, the Willen Choir as a course at BCC, we're taking a lot of courses and making them hybrid. The rehearsal in person will be shortened, and I will offer a Zoom session on a Saturday morning for getting more work done on our parts. So that combination to me is ideal, and I think that it will be also an easy pivot point should we need it. The Village Voices of Qualicum Beach, we're undecided yet. I should back up as I'm saying that because I do want to thank all of our executive members on all the choirs that I work with for the work they did in May and June to provide double treasurer's reports. Here's what the budget will be if. Here's what the budget will be if. If we can be in person at our other venue, we need to be in the bigger room. So churches were contacted. Village Voices has a wonderfully large auditorium with lots of opportunity to mark chairs and say, here's where we're going to stand. We're also going to have our masks. I would feel very good about an in-person rehearsal happening that way. As has been said by my two colleagues, everything will be Zoomed. We must have a way, for my peace of mind, I must have a way to reach the people who do not feel comfortable coming. Their personal safety does not allow them to be there, but they want to be part of the singing. And I also want to make sure that everyone feels very, very confident that they can miss a rehearsal in person, not miss the rehearsal because they're on Zoom, but the minute they're feeling unwell or tired or even just the slightest bit under the weather, the best strategy will be to stay home. So if Zoom is available, that will work. I've been Zooming the Vancouver Island Choir. This is a touring choir that gets together every couple of years to go somewhere. We've been to China and Scotland and Croatia. We're preparing for Spain in May 22. Oh, we'll see how that goes. But it's been fabulous to be out there and very fun to have everybody else on Zoom. And I'm getting better and better at addressing both parties at the same time. That's been a learning, one of the many Zoom learning experiences for me, and I'm now quite enjoying it. So that will make sure that that opportunity is left open for everyone. The two words that I'm going to keep telling myself all through this process, well, actually there's three. I need to trust. I need to trust the integrity and the sensibility of my singers, and so far everything I've seen on email points to that being something that I can really do. I'm going to give my trust that they will be forthcoming with me about their circumstances, and I know that they will give me that trust will be going both ways. The other two words are, I'm going to keep asking myself, does this respect and protect? The respect is about community. The protect is about the safety of what we're doing within our community. So does my decision respect and protect? If someone needs extra protection, and that has to do with their vaccination status, their protection is to be distanced, where we'll all be masked. But it is not about singling out, it's about me feeling protection for them and for the other singers. None of this is yet engraved in stone. I'm working on the input that I've been getting. We all know that the meetings we have at the end of August could change everything. Could change everything. And we're prepared for that. We're prepared to be flexible. We're prepared for shorter concerts. We're prepared for no social breaks, right? Chat outside, have a great time, but I won't be providing cookies and everything at the, there won't be a break for that kind of intermission. That'll be hardest on the kids, and I think the Willen Choir, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, maybe Village Voices too. They like to sell wine on their break. But all of these things, from what I'm hearing from people, they are so happy for the idea that we will continue, that we will at some point in time come together. Lots of people are saying, Trish, let's ride out the fourth wave, be virtual, knowing that we will get together. So the Patience Grasshopper is coming out, and I feel very, very fortunate that I have teams of people who are so willing at the executive level to show their patience, show their flexibility, listen to what's happening in the membership and what's required, and respond to that appropriately. Trying to think if I've left anything out. I think that's just about it, Brigid.
Thank you, Patricia. And big thanks to all three of you for your enthusiasm for the choral art and for your care for the singers who you feel responsible for. Andy, let's bring the other two in on this one, and I'll invite them to jump in where anything comes up. We're going to move now to some of the issues that came up in your questions, some of which have actually been addressed in some part by these three, but I'll ask them to jump in wherever it's appropriate. I need to repeat, this is not coming from Provincial Health. Those of us who are working on these issues are relying on research from other organizations. I know Robin has done an enormous amount of research. We would all prefer to hear Dr. Bonnie saying, this is what you can do in very clear terms. And we may still get to hear that in September, but at the moment, all we have is the directive that limits inside events to 50 people or half of the capacity. And the very informal word we had from her, which has not been put into writing, that we will be able to sing in the fall. Who knows? However, I find it very telling that singers are anxious enough that we don't want to take both of those things at face value. The most common question was about mandating full vaccination and or masking for choir membership. And I will say immediately that when we were working this, we had no firm legal read on this one. There was some very interesting stuff on the recent Choral Canada webinar from Vancouver lawyer and electra singer Alison Tremblay. And you may want to go to Choral Canada and investigate that, and especially the section that Alison was presenting in. I've made notes on where you could find that on the sheet of notes that will go out with this. I also talked with retired lawyer John Smith, who was the founding president of BC Choral Federation. And John talked to his daughter, Juliet, who is a practicing entertainment lawyer and very much involved in all of this stuff. John, are you around? Are you somewhere there? Can we get you in on this one?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. So Juliet said that it was a hot topic in the employment world, and nobody had a definitive answer. That singers aren't generally paid, except for things like Vancouver Chamber Choir. But the answer may be different for singers anyway. A double vaccination mandate could be open to challenge under the BC human rights legislation, which protects rights to personal integrity, preservation of dignity and privacy. A mandatory vaccination policy could be seen as infringing those rights due to the invasive nature of the vaccine and the collection of private information. However, and lawyers are very good at, however, and it depends, if you can demonstrate that the quote work environment is a high-risk environment, a mandatory vaccination policy might be justifiable. And when you think about how many choirs rehearse in cramped, poorly ventilated rehearsal venues, and the intrinsic need for choral singers to sing close to each other when the very act of singing sprays out droplets all over, you wouldn't think that the work environment qualifies it would possibly qualify as a high-risk one. So it's not clear whether human rights legislation concerned with employment conditions is applicable to voluntary participation in activities. Juliet, I assume this is Juliet's view, John, where a singer pays to participate, the organization has the right to make participation rules for the health and well-being of its members, particularly in a high-risk environment situation. If a singer doesn't want to follow the rules, he or she can take his or her money back and leave. It's not an issue of jeopardizing one's livelihood. And as to how to find out if somebody is vaccinated, legally, a person can decline to answer, but you could frame the rule so that declining to answer entitles you to prohibit or terminate that person's participation. For privacy reasons, don't take copies of proof of vaccination. John, do you want to take anything more of that? I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Well, the last bit is more me than Juliet, but certainly I think the situation with respect to double vaccination mandates is that with a choral group, you can't really talk about work environment, but you can certainly talk about the singing environment. And if that environment is putting the singers at risk, you can talk about having a double vaccination mandate. And although the evidence appears to be that the Delta variant is such that even a double vaccination doesn't protect you from necessary and doesn't completely protect you from getting COVID, I think the answer is it's more likely to protect you from getting COVID, and if you get it, it's less serious. Mm-hmm. So if choirs want to have a double vaccination mandate, I think you're not going to get very many people complaining or objecting. And if they do, then you tell them, okay, well, you don't need to sing.
So before you get into thinking those sort of legalities, it's actually worth thinking about other consequences. If you demand that everybody in the choir is fully vaccinated, what may happen? You might lose long time or valuable singers who have their own reasons for not getting vaccinated. You might, if the singer is angry about the condition, they might create a PR stir. If they have more money than sense, they could sue. Most of us actually pride ourselves on being community choirs. And what do the consequences mean for you as a community choir? One of the questions that I liked best in what came from Sean Lampard-Quick, who conducts Victoria Aryan Male Choir. And I want to give you his question. The balance of keeping everyone safe and welcomed when some singers have chosen not to get vaccinated is something we would like to hear more about. How to, and this is the important bit, without hurting any feelings or losing any singers. How can we decide on what we will require in terms of COVID mitigations and protocols while ensuring that everyone feels safe? It's a big question. It's a big question. And I will say again, BCCF cannot tell you what to do. But the spirit of what Sean asks, I think, is at the core of it. You have to make that decision for yourselves as a choir. But community and care for each other and respect are all really important issues to be thinking about.
You know, in the care industry, in the care home industry, when double vaccination mandates were being put in place, the number of people who decided not to go to work was minimal. It was down in the 1 to 2 to 5%, you know, less than 10%. Mm-hmm.
And the opposite side is true too. There are people who will not sing in choir if everybody else is not vaccinated.
Yeah. There
is that much fear.
Yeah.
Vaccination obviously is an intrusive process, but it's unseen. It's not clear that we can demand proof. We have no vaccination passport process at the moment. That may come. The travel passport is obviously on its way. And there are certainly issues around any medical information that you gather. The alternative is to require masking, as most stores do. Masking is a very visible way of putting everyone on the same footing. And you can say to your choir, either we all mask or we all don't sing. And that makes it really clear. And as we're thinking, now we're faced with the Delta variant. It's much more transmissible. There is evidence that even people who are vaccinated can be infected. The vaccination will usually protect against serious illness, but a vaccinated person may have an asymptomatic infection and not show their condition. Masks protect both the user and the people around. So if you have a fully vaccinated choir saying, you know, we've all had double shots, singing unmasked, you're still at risk that somebody may carry the Delta variant without being aware. Some of you may know the name of Joan Fernley in Ottawa, who has spearheaded the development of singers' mask design. She recently did a study on COVID outbreaks in international choirs through the last year. It's published in the Choral Canada blog. And she established that every single outbreak she found was in a choir that did not consistently use masks. So I would dare to suggest that even in a fully vaccinated choir, the use of masks for indoor singing in particular is the best way to protect your singers. Outdoors, you can get away with it if you've got space and air and all that stuff. But for indoor singing, think about it. Singing with a mask beats not singing at all. And that's what we want to do. We want to sing. If you have people who in your choir who don't like to mask, it's probably important to push heavily on. Look, Ernie, I know you don't want to wear a mask, but Bert is immune compromised. When you mask, he feels safer. Yeah, we need to be protecting each other. So while thinking about that, be aware that different people are comfortable with different styles. Andy, can you find Brian Dobbin? Brian has a singer's mask, which protects really well in front of the face, and it allows no contact at all with the lips. It's held there by bracing that gives it structure or by other stiffening material. Brian is modeling the singer's mask. And if you can see from the side how much it sticks out, it gives you a big space to sing in, an enormous space, and it covers below the chin. So Brian can drop his jaw as low down as it goes, and it won't fall off his nose. How is it to sing in, Brian?
I've sung several times in church, as we are allowed to do in the Anglican Church now. And it allows me actually to sing fairly well. Mm-hmm. The point that I would make is that these initially were not made to include an N95 filter. And so that is their present downfall. We have seen today that they're also available in black, though.
Yes, but slightly different. Robin,
yes,
you have a similar mask.
Sorry,
I'm calling on Robin.
My mask is from World Tailors in Ontario. This one was bought in, I want to say June 2020. So it's lived its life so far. Yeah. It has the same type of structure around the outside. It's got two very strong wires here. It's got a nose clip here, and it's got a good low band through here that seals tight quite tightly. This is the same design of Joan Fernley's. I find that I can project and speak quite clearly in it, and it rarely seems to cause a problem. The only thing that we did note for some people, if they're looking at this, for smaller faces, we had a day when we first got them and we tried them on all sorts of different people and everything else. Smaller faces didn't like them. They were too wide and they gaped. So the one thing we found for them, and Fiona was asking about it, were the breathing brackets. Oh, the cost of my singer's mask, I believe, were $15 at the time. So they're quite a bit more. However, I don't want to disparage the other one at all. The other one is meant to be disposable. This one has been washed 3 times a week for 18 months now. So I will say they're worth the money because they stand up. So, and they last. The breathing bracket is the other thing for the smaller faces. So it can go under any mask. You can get them from Amazon. I think they're like basically $1 each. You put strings on either side. It'll hold it in place. And generally you would just put another lightweight mask over the top. I'm sorry, that didn't demonstrate well.
I think I've got Jennifer Dufour ready to do that. Can you find Jennifer? So Jennifer's just got one of the ordinary regular medical masks, which I sometimes have problems with because again, they're not one size fits all. They often have gaping bits, but put a bracket in front and it gives you that space in front of the lips. I have what's called an origami mask made in one piece. So it's created, the shape of it is created by the fold that's used. And again, it fits very easily over the face. The large size actually extends a little further, but it's very comfortable to wear and it doesn't touch my lips at all. And then groups like Vancouver Chamber Choir and Intima have been singing throughout the past season with extreme care and all protocols involved. And they actually seem to prefer a close-fitting but flexible mask. I'm not certain if it has enough layers, but with all the other protocols covered, they may be okay. But something like that, where the lips are actually quite close, but there's enough flexibility. The trick with masks is you have to test around and find something that feels comfortable for you individually. And it depends on the length of your face, and it depends on the width of your face, and it may depend on the placement of your nose and how much bridge you have. So encourage your singers to do some hunting around. And if you get to concertizing, you have to decide whether you're prepared to have everybody in different styles of masks, or whether you want some uniformity, in which case you really do need to plan ahead. Let's move on. I don't think there's any magic button that we can press that will enable us to go back to normal. What we heard 16 months ago about the outbreak in the Skagit Valley Choral, life changed for choral singers. There's been an enormous amount of research since then, notably the studies at Colorado University, and they all acknowledge the fact that singers project aerosols and droplets when we sing. We just can't help it. And if those aerosols happen to carry a load of COVID virus, especially the Delta variant, then other people are at risk. Most of the Colorado study has focused on how we can mitigate those risks. And there's a great deal of very carefully researched material available on the BCCF COVID-19 resources page from Choral Canada and from many other sources. There are 5 important factors to consider. You don't have to achieve them all perfectly, but you need to think about all of them. Sanitizing. We know that COVID is passed mainly in droplets and aerosols, but if your droplet lands on something or other and you have hand contact and then you touch your face, so we're being careful about sanitizing. Masking, as we've discovered. Distancing, 6 foot, is it, Robin? Is the usual?
At least 6 feet.
At least
Someone asked in the chat and I didn't answer it. I tend to distance 7.5 feet minimum. And if you look at the video that I played a little bit of, you'll see that some people are quite a bit more, like 10 feet and 12 feet. Because I have the space when I'm indoors, I just use it. If I've got the space, I'm going to give them as much as I can.
Yeah. Francis.
Brigid, I just wanted to mention, while we've been on this meeting, and many of you may know that Dr. Henry has been meeting with people on the telephone. Some of you may have received, maybe it was only Interior Health. Was it just Interior Health that got that call to have a telephone conversation with Bonnie Henry at town hall? And I haven't been there, obviously, I've been with you. And so a friend just texted me what Dr. Henry has said specifically in terms of choirs. Don't worry, it's not life altering. Someone phoned in and said, can her seniors choir gather and rehearse? Here is what she said. She said choirs should be immunized and distanced if they want to practice, preferably outdoors. She didn't say anything about masks. So that's the latest from Dr. Henry.
Thank you. Ventilation you've heard about. The ideal situation is to have somewhere that you've got good air exchange and HEPA filters and all of that sort of stuff. And the 5th one is duration. Thinking about shortening the length of the rehearsal, certainly not having chatty breaks. Just make sure that it's open. Yeah, there's the word from Andy, immunized and distanced. There are several documents that Andy has put in a folder for you. One of them is my overview notes for this back to singing session, with more details on many of those issues. A second one is the document that Robin used with her singers last season, which focuses on the COVID protocols that they used. A third one is a questionnaire, I think came from Patricia, that you may model your own questionnaires on. Did it come from Choral Canada in the first place?
Choral Canada.
Okay.
Yes.
And I think Andy has put the link into chat, and he will also post it on the BCCF website to get those things. Robin, do you want to speak to your protocols at all, or does it speak for itself?
I would say for our current COVID situation, it's a wee bit draconian. But the one thing I would say is if you haven't had your singers back in person at all, I would expect a fair bit of fear and a fair bit of trepidation. I have wondered about this just because nobody kept meeting in some way. Once we were allowed to, was it in April where we got the 10-person small groups? I don't even remember now. Well, we got to do small groups of 10 people or less outside. We went back to meeting in person. And what I found every week, I always gave my singers the option of returning or not returning. They always had the option of being on Zoom. Everyone has a different feeling of safety. And so that is the biggest thing, that if you see what our measures put in place last year, if you have a group that's very worried or high risk, take some of the things we said. If I was on Island Health, I would put something like my travel measure in. In Northern Health, we're quite isolated and we don't get the same kind of transmission from tourism, and we generally have had lower numbers. So last year we put in the measure that if you left Northern Health or went to an area that was exposed, you had to be on Zoom for 2 weeks. Boom. I don't, that obviously doesn't work for Fraser or Vancouver Coastal, but for us, it gave people, I hope not a false sense of security, but a sense that we were looking at all the factors. And so I would say take the document, feel free to pull it apart, because I don't think all the measures are necessary now. But if you have a building that doesn't have great ventilation, use our entrance and exits. I staggered it by row. I used 2 different doors for them to come in. So they would enter from the back of the hall. I planned it so that they would meet in the middle. It was just a simple Excel spreadsheet every week. And that made people feel very safe enough that when we had our first rehearsal back, and I didn't stagger their entrances this time because we're just in a parking lot, so it felt a little ridiculous. One of the women who came just a little bit later was in the back row, and she's like, well, how do I get there? And I'm like, you can just walk around. Because there was no building, you could just walk around. But she was like, oh, I can't walk through because we hadn't let anybody last year. And I'm like, oh, you can just walk around and be absolutely safe. So think about those types of things.
Isn't that a tribute to your training process though, Robin? Mm-hmm. Right? That you've got people thinking about that. And I think that's marvelous.
Yeah, well, it surprised me because we had new members and we had members who hadn't been in the choir last year. And it surprised me how much they all just followed suit. Nobody, they congregated afterwards to chat, but all outside. And then everybody sort of did the thing where they all just walked straight to their pylons. And it was like, okay, happy.
I would like to add that I've been watching the protocols of people coming to even the outdoor rehearsals. And I am so thankful that people are being very sensible. They're protecting themselves. They're realizing where their own safety extends and does not extend. And they're
protecting
moving
each other
accordingly. And so anything that's please come and come to the indoor rehearsal, or please come to choir masked and distance, will be nothing but an invitation in our choirs. Everyone must stay home on Zoom if that's how they feel. So I hope that we can all find ways to include everybody by having these various options available.
Yeah. Getting back to the question list, somebody asked about the use of air purifiers, and I've stuck a doc from Public Health Ontario about this topic into the folder. Basically, it comes down to this is only one of the many mitigation techniques we have and not something we should rely on solely. If it's going to be effective in a big space, it's going to be darned expensive. There were many questions about children singing, and there are no easy answers, especially when school boards are not taking a stand on mandatory masking. There is too much that we don't know about children and COVID. On our COVID resources page, there's a lead to a doc that was formulated by Diana Clark and Carrie Tennant for children's community choirs. There's nothing that I can see on Coastal Sound's webpage, but Vancouver Youth Choir's page has information about their COVID protocols, and you may want to go to there and take a look, vancouveryouthchoir.com. Obviously, this is a community choir and not a school choir, but those of you who are in a school situation should consider what protocols you can use. Anything is better than nothing. Somebody asked, do we need to submit an infectious disease plan for health officials to health officials before we commence rehearsals and or performances? They've certainly not asked for it as a part of opening up stage 3. However, I think it's a really good idea for any group meeting, choir or not, to have a documented plan in place to meet the needs of an outbreak. I don't think public health wants it, but you might consider whether you want to keep it as an internal document or post it on your website. The more people in your choir are able to access that sort of information, the better.
I'll add one quick note on that, Brigid.
Sure.
If your choir has employees, not private contractors, the communicable disease prevention plan is actually a part of WorkSafe BC. So if you have employees, then you absolutely do need one. If you have independent contractors, then no, you don't. For us, we are waiting till September 7th, because presumably that's when it will be there. And yes, what Kelly Finlinson just said, the venues, a lot of our plan was developed in response to our venue because it was one of the few places that was renting last year. And so we had to have everything really locked down and planned.
And many venues will have that. That ties into a question about personal legal liability to board members if any participating choir member contracts COVID from one of the choir rehearsals or concerts. It's something that I think you'd need to consult with your insurance people and a lawyer, and I am neither. But I think if you have a clearly documented plan and you're covering all the protocols, that would be important evidence. If it's obvious that you don't care and you're sloppy about procedures, then somebody might have a case. But be really clear about what it is that you're trying to do. John, do you have anything to add to that? Does that make sense?
No, I don't. I think you said the right thing.
Yeah.
Document everything, because then you've got some protection. But talk to your insurer if you have.
Basically, it's the same reason that we have a board, is that we have meetings that get minuted and decisions that are made in good faith and documented.
Yeah.
So Robin pointed out that when your singers register for the new season, it may be worth including some sort of release to be signed off, acknowledging that in the case of an outbreak, Provincial Health may require any records. So just think about what your registration document for the new year might look like, or what it might include. There were several questions about seniors' safety, seniors' choirs, with some reason. Seniors were badly hit by the pandemic at the beginning, though not seniors' choirs, and they're understandably anxious. The protocols for seniors' choirs are the same as for any others. If you're following all the mitigation, you should be as safe as you can be anywhere, except shut up in your home. I'm obviously concerned for seniors who have a real emotional need, as many of us do, for participation in their choir community. It's one of the things that makes us healthy, is being part of a community. Any individual has to make their own decisions, but senior choir boards do have to think about what is going to be safest for their people. Conditions will vary. Right now, the seniors choirs of the Okanagan and the Caribou will probably be on hiatus a good bit longer, while they get the Delta variant and the fire under control. Choirs in areas where COVID numbers are small may choose to restart with a lot of care. For fearful seniors and fearful singers of any age, for that matter, we might discuss placement in choir, as Robin does. Put the people who are fearful at one edge of the choir so that they feel they've got space around them. Any other questions there? What have we missed in the course of? I'm looking at what Andy has come up with for me. Masks, yes. What have I missed? French Community Choir in North Vancouver and had a waiver signed by our choristers. Is this protecting us from legal action? John can answer this one, but I think waivers have very small effect. Yes? No? Marilyn asks, did you each work with your board of directors to develop your protocols? And can you share a little bit about that process? Or did it come from you?
I would like to say that the information that I'm getting from choir members is being directed by what wonderful, wonderful boards and executives have put forth as being their idea of what would be ideal through. I think it's a team effort for my groups, between myself, between, if it's the children's choir, the parents, between the feelings of the choristers, and the executive, of course, ultimately making the decision with me. But I feel very strongly and very fortunate that we've had quite a broad process going on.
Thank you, Patricia.
Mine is pretty much the same. Last year, my board was incredibly involved and took on a lot of the work because last year was so different. I remember when we had our final meeting in May, I presented them with 7 different scenarios for the season of different things we could do. And I never generally actually have to approve my artistic plans. But this was the first year I was like, you guys get to choose what happens next year. So they were very, very involved. This year, less so. And I think it's because we had such a good plan that evolved last year. We have just continued to morph it. Does that, like, I think once you get something in writing, it can be like, hey, do we feel comfortable with this? And then it's like, okay, that's what we're going to do. Because it's just been, we've just kept morphing, but we've kept to the general structure of our plan.
Thank you, Robin. Francis, anything?
Just to say, where I have a board in place, which isn't with all my groups, then we're working with the board. Certainly, although, I think I'm the one following the information just because I'm steeped in, being in the online groups or following the webinars and all that kind of stuff. And so it is, to some degree, we need to encourage our boards to take some leadership in this, to take this off. I feel this weight. I really do feel this weight. And that's a worry for me because I'd really like to be singing.
Yes, please don't leave it all to your conductor. Really unfair. John Smith, can I call on you again? I've got another question about waivers. Are there any recommendations concerning asking participants to sign a waiver stating their awareness that this could increase their risk of developing COVID? Are waivers worth the paper they're written on?
I don't know the answer to that. You would think that that if a waiver is obtained and people understand what it is they're signing, that it gives you some sort of protection. I guess I end up by thinking it's not going to do any harm to get a waiver, but don't rely on it for complete protection. But maybe it wouldn't do any harm. I don't know what everybody feels about facing a singer with, you've got to sign this piece of paper or you can't come and sing. But maybe it's helpful.
Can I make a comment or just my concern? It's Kim Kleinenberg.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah. See, my concern is that a lot of people are there's a great divide, amongst people, and how the feeling is of the big issue for us right now is, where we're at in the Okanagan. It's an unhealthy time here, but also that how people are going to feel, masked or not masked, standing in the choir loft with unvaccinated people who have to go home to children at night and things like that. That was where our last board meeting went, and we actually took a vote, and I don't know, I'm feeling like this is going to create a very unhealthy divide, and that people will sort of take sides, and it's going to ruin the wonderful feeling in the group. So I'm really struggling with this, because we never had everybody on board with this. And in fact, one of the person on our board is does all our finances. She won't get vaccinated. So you can imagine how unpleasant and awkward that board meeting was. And I love her, and she's a very good friend of mine. It's such a difficult situation. I just don't know what to do. Honestly, I want to make everybody happy. I even consulted Mike Delorme, his Dr. Delorme, he's an immunologist, about this. And his sort of bottom line was that the safety of many can't be outweighed by the choices of a few. That was kind of his bottom line. But at the same time, I don't know. Is it okay to ask people to stand in the choir loft unvaccinated next to people who have chosen to have both, to be fully vaccinated? That's my core issue.
Do you think she's going to object to being masked? Will your choir be masked?
No, I don't think she would. And that's one thing that I've really taken away from tonight. Francis, where we are in the Okanagan right now, we've had to just say, no, we're not going to meet this fall. At least we're gonna have another board meeting come sort of middle of September, and have a look at what's going on, because we're in a different situation than a lot of the other groups on this page. But it's the mask thing. I'm hoping, like, do people think that's gonna change that? It's gonna fix that if everybody's masked and distanced?
I think there have been a lot of choirs who have rehearsed over the past year, who have been masked and distanced before vaccinations were available, without there being a problem. I'm not saying that that's what you should do. Be clear about that. But I think there is proof that.
I was just going to say, Joan Fairley's study, and I don't know that we prove anything, but we did rehearse for a significant amount of time last year until that November lockdown. Distance, masked, indoors, when there was no vaccine available to anybody.
Right.
The one thing that I would say, and this sort of depends on your group structure, I don't know from the sounds of it if that's there. My group sort of inherently last year, and I tried to always not defend my choices, but explain them clearly, is that the reason that I was asking questions about health, or other people who have said anything else, I knew that my group couldn't come back fully vaccinated. My 19-year-olds haven't had the opportunity. Like, that's the reality. They're half vaccinated or they're waiting. So I knew that was my obstacle going in. Nobody seemed to be terribly worried about it, because we knew that we were going to be so distanced, because I put people in places where if I know someone is at risk, they are almost literally 90 feet away from the other person who might be exposed. Right. So that's what I mean about strategic placement. If you have a structure that can trust that, it's doable. Because that's the same thing for someone who can't vaccinate. Someone's choir is going to have that issue. Right. I have a 41 voice choir, a mixed 41 voice. Yeah. And I just wonder if that's how the sentiment's going to be. It's not a matter of not being able to be vaccinated. It's a choice to not vaccinate, and or won't at any point. And like that's where I'm struggling.
Brigid.
Yes, John.
I think unfortunately there's an obligation to tell the rest of the choir that there is an unvaccinated singer. Right. I actually, so far I have two, and one of them was on my board. So
yes,
yeah, I'm really losing sleep over this. It means a lot to me. And I mean, some of these, one of them in particular was my student for 3 years. I taught her in high school, and now she's back singing with me, and we're
super close, and she just refuses to get vaccinated. And yeah, it puts
So
you in a,
the big question that we all have to deal with in that situation is, do we allow that person to sing with us masked and distanced, even in that situation?
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Yeah.
What I would like to hear from people about, like, will that work?
And our job is to keep people safe. I mean, obviously to make wonderful music, but
Yes.
our responsibility as leaders is to keep our people safe.
I will just pop
Very
in
much.
with one situation from a person who cannot wear a mask physically because of the configuration of the face. And we've had a great conversation and decided that that individual will be seated right by the doors, as close to outdoors as possible, and coming to a compromise. So I think the flexibility is on both sides. If you've made a decision about vaccination or you physically can't wear a mask, you're aware that you're part of the respect, so you have to take responsibility for the possibility that you will be in a different place. And there was zero pushback, again, because of the gratitude of, that's great. I'm so glad that I can be there.
Yeah.
But what about concerts though? What do you do about that?
That's a long way away, Kim.
I know.
Yes. Yeah. And we're well over time. We're well over time, guys. And
can't everybody solve all these things for me today?
Yeah. We are well over time, and I need to wind this up. The three of you, were you willing to let people have your email addresses so that they can contact you with direct questions if necessary? And if so, could you put them in the chat? That would help. Time is pretty well up. I know it's frustrating when we've had to keep saying, we can't tell you what to do, but you've got what we can give you. Enormous thanks to our panelists this evening, to Robin Norman and Francis Chasson and Patricia Plumley. Thanks to Andy for holding the tech together. Thanks to Willie for lurking. Thanks for John Smith for allowing me to put him on the spot. Thanks to all who offered questions and all the people who are determined to sing safely this season. We've got 2 more BCCF events upcoming. On Wednesday, the 25th of August, 2 weeks away, we've got an evening called Board Biz to look at some choir governance issues. On Saturday, the 18th of September, we've got a vocal spa morning session with Dr. Julia Davids and members of Canadian Chamber Choir. We're all pretty rusty from the last year, and this will help us brush off the vocal rust. If you can get your choir to register for $150, it means that any member of your choir can take part in it for free. So talk to your choir directors or your treasurers or whatever it is, and see if you can get them to pay $150 for all of your choir to take part. We're always glad to hear from you of topics or people that we need to present in future workshops. So please be in touch with me at any stage. projectmanager@bcchoralfair.com. Robin, Francis, Patricia, thank you again. And good night to everybody, and sing safely.